I'm very pleased to see you all, particularly because my heart always sinks when I see I'm talking after 4 o'clock, because I know the chance of people making it 4 o'clock is fairly slim. So thank you so much, those who have come. You may think that you're here to hear me talk about innovation in communication, and I am in a way, but I'm very much focusing this on behaviour change, which is the subject of the moment. But the reason that I want to talk about it is because I've called it the goose that lays the golden eggs. And I think that there are 3 or 4 reasons why it's going to become so important over the next year. And why I want us to think about communication and marketing, particularly in this context of getting behaviour change. The first is that we still have big problems to solve. We still have 50,000 people dying of cold. We still have difficulty in persuading people to take up high-quality childcare, to give those children who most need it every chance in life. We still have issues of getting people to take up pensions and so on. We also know that we are going to have to do more. You must have heard this a million. I'm tired of hearing it, to be honest, but it is true. We're going to have to do more with less, and we're going to have to do it faster, which means that we either undertake things where we think there are just a few quick wins, or we get really better at doing it. And then finally, I think communication and marketing is the absolute key to getting behaviour change if we work together with policy and delivery. So that's why I've chosen it as the subject. And I hope I haven't brought you here under false pretences, because forgive the graphics on this. I always think at 4 o'clock people like a bit more humour than the heavy stuff from the civil service. So forgive me for this, but I think it is the goose that can lay the golden egg for us. It's also a great time to surf the wave. Now, what I mean by this is that things are actually going with us. There is something that's good that's come out of the credit crunch. And I actually want to ask you a fairly personal question to start with. You may not want to answer this, but have you caught yourself buying a Mr. Kipling fondant fancy over the last few months? Or a cupcake. Actually, men don't get cupcakes, do they? Women will in the audience anyway. If you have, that's the wave that I want to talk about surfing over the next week, over the next few minutes. What we know is that there are things going with us. We know that, I'm only going to go through 4 or 5 of these because I think you know them quite well. People crave care. What they want to see is that we understand them and that we empathise with what's going on. We also know that they're intolerant of greed. My son works in New York and actually sent me this. And it was at the time in Wall Street when several banks were going under, and there was a great fear that bankers may commit suicide. And he saw this side. I think it's just a fantastic side, but it does sum up this whole thing about greed. Actually, I put this up at Civil Service Live in Gateshead, and I thought, God, that's 3-4 months ago. A lot has changed, but this has become particularly pertinent over the last 3 or 4 months. What we also see is return to tradition. I was absolutely shocked to look at this group of products because back end of last year I looked at this. What we buy in the grocery trade is audited by AC Nielsen. And I looked at what were the really big growth areas over last year. And these are the products. And it was like going back 30 years. I actually have marketed half the brands on this chart at some stage over the last 34 years. And it is Hovis, it is Branston Pickle, it is biscuits, it is the comfort foods that we crave. The Arctic roll has made a hell of a comeback over the last 6 months or so, I can tell you. It really does take me back. I'm not going to say much about connected and sharing. You know the data. You know that I still can't quite believe it when I read some of this, that 90% of 12 to 15-year-olds are using the internet daily. Actually, you may know some of these answers. If we look at the new trusted sources, how many hours of video are uploaded every minute of every hour of every day? Any idea? It's actually 13 hours. You may get closer on how many videos are watched daily. 1 billion. 1 billion videos are watched daily, which I find an absolutely stunning number still, so I had to put it up there. And in fact, what that raises for us as communicators is, what's our role in giving the facts? How trusted are we against all of these things? Now, we do have a chance to change behaviour. If we surf these waves that we've got, all of the things that we've found quite difficult, like how do we get people to take up a pension? How do we get them to save? How do we get them to recycle, even if it's something as simple as paper? What about self-reliance that we want? Watching out for others. If you're from children's schools and families, you will know that one of the big thrusts is we want to involve the whole community in safeguarding children. In a single generation, we've gone from people who watch over our children to those who see things happen but are reticent to get involved and to report it. I think we stand a better chance of doing it now. If we look at next one. Could you just advance the slide for me, please, on the next? Thank you. Sorry about this. Got a little audio-visual problem, I think. But if we look at a number of things that we really do need to put right, community spirit, teaching children new values instead of materialism which they've grown up with, and actually changing the style of parenting and the lifestyles. All of those health issues we have, things are going with us now. And I think this is summed up by something which does take, I was going to say takes me back to my childhood, not far off my childhood, I might say, of that keep calm and carry on, which is that spirit that we've got going with us. So what I want to look at is the innovations which are going to help us to do this. I'm going to start with a bit of science, I'm afraid. Then I'm going to do the simple thing, which is the 5 rules and 5 tools which I use. And then finally, if I rule the world, what I would be doing about it. I'm not going to do all 10, but I will do 2 or 3 of them that I think is important. Now, if we take the science bit, I think part of the problem is that we make this very complicated, so I want to simplify it right down, but we do need to do it. Has everyone got a book in front of them? I do apologise for the nature of the book, but what I'm aware of at these things is that, has everyone got a copy? If you haven't, there's one at the front anyway. Some of the contents in here I'm not going to go through. I've done it this way because what I notice is when I come to these events, there are always those beautifully typed and written brochures and they're beautifully printed. I'm the antidote to that. What I want you to do is to just take in the really simple stuff that I think makes the difference. And this is almost like my notebook on it. So forgive the graphics, but do take the content in. It's serious. And I want to go through why we behave as we do. Why do we make the decisions we do? And where does this behaviour come from? Now, the first bit of it, and I might say I've read 2,000 pages on this that's been issued by government over the last 6 months alone, which is all about the science of doing it. This is one chart that summarises it all, and I've made it look, almost deceptively simple, but I promise you, most of the richness that's in those 2,000 pages is really captured in this chart, so forgive the simplicity. What we do, first of all, is form a behavioural intent. We start off with the things that we know and the facts. Now, the issue that we have is that some of the things that people think they know are not correct, but we still have to measure them, know what they are. But also, we need to know what their awareness is of the issue. The biggest issue that we often find in this is that some of the things which relate to people, they just don't perceive are important to them. So if you went to a great thing earlier today on child obesity and what Change for Life has been all about. And one of the things that we know there is that something like 82% of fathers with an obese child think that child's weight is normal. They may know the facts about obesity, they just simply don't relate it to them. So it isn't as simple as it appears here. What we also know is that people's attitudes, values and beliefs really come into play. If I'm in the private sector, I can put numbers on this for you. I can tell you that 70% of what we do in terms of our shopping behaviour or behaviour in terms of the choices that we make for the goods that we buy is to do with attitudes, values and beliefs. It is not really a rational decision, which is why we talk about functional and emotional communication. But that isn't the full story, because we filter that through two things. Now, the first things are the things which are really going with us and are very helpful. They're the drivers which help us to get the behaviour that we want as communicators in government. The incentives and the regulation. If you're a policy maker, you'll spend many happy hours in here working out what it is that we're going to do. And I think if you're a marketer in the room, one of the most difficult decisions we have to make is, do we use stick or do we use carrot? Do we incentivize people to do the behaviour that we want them to do, or do we put up the barriers and regulate against the behaviour that we don't want? But we also have some of the unhelpful things. These are the barriers that stop people doing what we're doing, we want them to do for us. There are also other things like complexity. If we make things too difficult for people, then they just pack up and go home. My rule of thumb is the more we give people to do, the less they do with it. So, for example, if we take climate change, they will say, you know, just remind me today, is it good to have a dishwasher or isn't it? Should I be using a plastic bowl? You're not serious, I can take one holiday a year and fly. And disposable nappies, I've got to give those up? You know, you must be joking. Thank you very much, it's all too difficult. And they just give up on us. Practicalities, I wish I could eat healthy food, but I can't afford it. And the unknowns. Now, I'm going to come on to some of these in a second. When they've gone through all of that, then they behave a certain way. But the issue is that the next time they may do something different. Or once they've behaved in a certain way, it may lead them to do something else. Now, what happens is that we simplify to survive. I counted last. Have you heard of heuristics? Biases is a lot of topics across government talking through this. I've counted 32 biases over the last year. I'm going to give you 6 of them. But they are the things that we really need to unravel and to think about if we're really going to be successful in social marketing. The first is availability, where we sort of weigh up the risks and we often get it wrong. So, for example, swine flu is probably not anything like as serious for our children as asthma, for example. But we think it is because the information that we get right now is emphasizing it so much. It is so much more available and salient to us that we make that decision. Self-expectation and commitment. I've put Obama here because the campaign is fantastic to go through. If we've got time at the end of the session, I'll just go through some of it. But we know that the key to success that they worked out is they had to get at least 15% more people out to vote, people who had never voted in their lives. The whole of the communication was worked towards how do we get those people out. They knew if they got them to vote, they were more likely to vote for Obama, but that wasn't the issue. It was just getting them to vote. And the mechanism they set up was phoning people and getting them to commit. If they committed to go to vote, they were twice as likely as if they hadn't been phoned or they didn't commit. And for us, getting that commitment is so important. There's another one, inertia stated. We would rather just keep on doing the things that we're doing. And the reason I've got someone with their head down the toilet, if you're wondering, is every time we have these unholy rows in the press between scientists, or we have... the one I remember this year that made me very, very cross was someone announcing, I hope he's not in the room actually, someone announcing that, that horse riding was more dangerous than taking ecstasy. When we do that, we give people a get-out clause and they do other things. Risk aversion. I use this example a lot because we have now worked out what's going on here. We're close to losing herd immunity on a lot of our childhood illnesses. And those parents who don't get their children vaccinated know that there is a risk. They know these childhood illnesses can be serious, but they almost see it as an act of God. But if they choose to get their child inoculated, and God forbid something happens to the child, I did that to my child, I caused it. They would rather not take that risk. Another couple, loss aversion. We are hugely loss averse. I think in the book I put the example is that we are incredibly delighted if we win £10, but we are even more sorry if we lose £10. We are very much loss averse. I've put insurance here because I picked up a fantastic example in the Foreign Office, which is they used to spend quite a lot of their time rescuing people who were jailed for having sex on the beach in Faliraki and things like this. What they're actually doing is now rescuing people like me who are taking their gap year in their 50s and 60s and going on incredibly dangerous holidays. How many of them do you think go without any insurance whatsoever? 38%. Does that shock you? It absolutely shocked me. Not even for an ordinary holiday, but a fairly adventurous holiday, and they're not taking insurance because that's money they pay out and they don't think they're going to get it back. And then this is my absolute favourite, hyperbolic discounting. I absolutely love. It's about we'd rather have jam today than jam tomorrow. It's about immediate gratification. So what does all that mean? It means we're not rational in the decisions that we make. My view on this is don't fight the biases, and can we just stop talking about them, writing 2,000 pages about them, and just put them into practice now? So that's what I want to look at. I also think that it helps if we understand a little bit about how the brain works. Now, I am no expert in this area, but I know enough, and I certainly put it into practice in the private sector, and I'll show you how we do that. Basically, information goes into the back of the brain. It's the most primitive part, and it's the fight or flight mechanism that we have. Now, our whole aim in life is to get information further into the brain. If we take it into the left brain, if, for example, in the private sector, I want people to remember a phone number, I want to see if the information I give them goes into the left brain. Quite often, as I said, 70% of decisions are about emotion. I want to see if it goes into the right brain. And then, if I can get it into those frontal lobes, that's where some of the memory takes place. I know they'll remember me, they'll remember the brand, they'll remember the message. Now, I don't see us putting this into practice a lot in the private sector, public sector, as we do in the private. I thought this was a great quote. Brain science reveals most of our reasons for acting are not merely processed unconsciously. You know, we don't really realize that, how we're making decisions. But they're unconscious. They never even touch or enter our consciousness. We actually just do things without us being rational people. So when people say to me, look, the role of government is not to tell people how to live their lives. It's just to give them information. We're rational, you know, rational men, rational beings will make the right decision. I wish it were true. Not in a million years is that true. We simply don't do it. We know this in the private sector. This is what we measure about our communication. We look at attention. What level and what kind of communication attention do we get? Does it enter into the long-term memory? What about the engagement, the sort of psychological engagement, where we really engage the emotions so that people feel that it's the right thing to do? And how intense is that? And then what attracts and repels? This is a difficult one because we're not always looking for communication or advertising that people like. But we are looking at elements which really grab them and which they don't like. Now, this is the way that we measure it. I don't know if you're familiar with what happens. A lot of the communication in the private sector, we actually measure all of those things by using brain patterns. The first example isn't too clear, it's Diet Coke, but I'll show you a second one, which I think is a little bit clearer on the film. If we can just play that, that would be great, thanks. Have we got sound with that one? We're having problems with the sound. Do the next one then, that would be fine. Don't worry too much about it. If we've got the next one. Diet Coke, I can tell you exactly what the answer is. Are you familiar? Do you remember the man? It'll be no surprise to you. There are 3 peaks for women viewing this, and you know exactly where they are, and they are absolutely predictable. Tick the box, job done, we know where we are. Do you think the next one's okay to play? Let's look at the apple and see where that one's come in. Is that okay? If we can move on to the next slide. Thank you. Just look at this apple. I think you'll remember this.
until you meet the new iMac.
There we can see exactly what engages people, what goes rational, what goes emotional, and importantly, what gets into the long-term memory. That is how we measure communication in the private sector. Are you aware that that's done? That's at all. That's the sort of science that we use to actually find out whether our messages are hitting home. There is no reason why we can't do that in a lot of the public sector work that we do, and that's why the brain messages are important. We need to take people on that emotional journey, and I think this just sums it up. They may forget what you said, but they'll never forget how you make them feel. And that's what I want to go on to think about now, is how we do that journey. The first is that we see people in context and who engages them. So if we take the first up, family and friend, pretty straightforward with that one. But we then have to look at the networks. This is going to be a big theme of the coming year, as is the society in which we see people. This is where we now stand. I think we're pretty good at looking at the generational influences, which we know are very big on youth. Actually, friends are the new family as far as youth goes. We know, for example, if you're in, again, children's schools and families, you will know how well a child succeeds is about what parents expect of them and what they learn from parents, the attitudes, values, and beliefs that they inherit. So that one, I think we've got ticked pretty well. The next one, we are babes in arms, really. We're just the beginning of the journey on this. And this is partnership marketing. I don't mean stakeholder management, and I don't just mean partnering. I mean taking this to a whole new step, where we actually engage people to help us to deliver the messages and to do it long term. That's going to be one of the biggest thrusts over the next year for us. Change for Life, if anyone was in that session, they've done it pretty well, and that's, I think, one of the first pathfinders for it. The big one is society and how we get social norming, so we get some of these big changes. How do we make it acceptable for people to want to succeed if they come from a certain background? How do we make it unacceptable for people to carry knives? All of those things are about social norming. So we change the perception of what people think is acceptable. So my first bit of advice on that one is, in my terms, don't try and boil the ocean all in one go. You know, this is the way that I think we can do it best. There are really 4 different types of decisions that we can make. There can be either a single behavior change, or it can be really the difficult ones where we're looking for multiple change. And we also can have the ones where social norming is going with us, where we've already started on this path, or the ones where we haven't even begun. Now, I'll give you examples just to bring this to life. If we take reducing car crime, I saw some great statistics on this from the Home Office. They chose to look at theft from cars. So they took it down to a single issue where they could focus and make real moves forward. And the social norms are with us. People don't really think it's acceptable to steal from cars. So we were okay. We were on the first path there. If we take about mobile use in cars, we've legislated on it. It is a single behaviour. But we've got to change social norms. The legislation isn't fully acceptable because people still don't buy it. And one of the biggest lessons that I've learned since working in government is just because we make legislation, we regulate, doesn't mean that it changes people's behaviour. If they don't buy it, they don't do it. And that's where we've got to on this one. We've got to find other ways to work in tandem. If we look at multiple behaviour change, climate change is really an outcome, not a behaviour change. But think of the things that we could do. It could be about recycling. It could be about use of transport. It could be about the products that we buy. It could be it could be all sorts of things that we can tackle there. It's really a multiple issue. The good thing is we have got the social norms with us now. I think it's something, someone from DEFRA or DEC will correct me, I think it's something like 7% of people now buy climate change, and they say, yep, I'd love to do something about it. The biggest issue that we have there is the vast majority don't do anything at all, even changing the light bulbs. That's the job that we've now got to do. And then we've got the biggest one of them all, which is reversing obesity. There, we've got multiple behaviour changes. We want people to start on the first little steps of doing it, but it isn't good enough to change one thing. We've got to change our lifestyle, the way that we eat, and we've got to be more active. There are a number of things that we've got to do. We want parents also to change the way they wean children, to change the way they feed them. We also would be more successful if we changed how people eat, what they eat, and where they eat. 63% of meals are eaten on the knees in front of the TV, where we consume roughly a third more calories. So that's a big one, and we have not got the social norms going with us. That is why Change for Life is such a good example, because it's having to work right at the top right there in order for us to do it. The further down to the bottom left I'm given to work on in government, the more I can think of success, the easier it becomes. So, for example, if we take smoking, where we have really changed things over the last few years, we've been very successful in it. So my view is be realistic and chunk it up if you've got to do it. I couldn't go through a session like this without mentioning two things, insight and segmentation. I just want to do this because I often talk about insight and segmentation. And what I've noticed is when it comes to behaviour change, people almost think that it's something different. You know, we did that last year, now we're moving on to behaviour change. Not so. All of those skills which we've spent the last couple of years really getting are what we now put into practice. So a very quick reminder, you know what we're doing when we segment. We're dividing people into reachable groups. And it's based on three things. Who they are demographics, that's what we revert to most often. It's things like age and gender and ethnicity and location. If we're lucky, we'll have a bit of what they do and their behaviour. How they think and feel is often the really powerful stuff, and we don't do that nearly as often. I had a lovely segmentation from Knife Crime I found in the Home Office, where it actually shows how powerful it is if we can do the thinking and feeling. The first three segments, they've called knifers, shielders and swarmers. They're all pro-knife, but they have very, very different motivations. The first are all about status, the shielders are all about protection. Swarmers are girls who just want to join the group and be part of the gang. That is the first three. The next four actually are not pro-knife necessarily. The first two, shooters and punchers, have a different weapon of choice. Moving on is a really interesting group. Those are the ones who can be anti-knife because they've gone beyond it. They used to be involved in it. They now have different aspirations. They're a really important group for us to click into. And then we have observers. The one that I am most worried about is the fearful, who are just getting into it and may take it forward. And so it helps us to decide. We can plot it in this way, likelihood and threat of being violent. And if we take the two groups, remember the decisions that we make from segmentation. The three key questions are, does one size fit all? Have we got one solution for each of those groups? In this case, clearly not. The second is, if we've not got enough money, which ones do we focus on? And then the third is, who can help us do it? And in this case, they have chosen to do the fearfuls, which is those who are likely to get in. The others are well past it in a part of the criminal justice system or where we get police involved. But we can do something about fearfuls. And the wonderful example here is those who are moving on can be the best advocates of all. They may not listen to us, but they will listen to that peer group so we can involve them. So don't think segmentation has gone. It's still a critical part. I just want to whisk through then, having gone through that background of how we go about getting behaviour change. And this is the way that I do it. I've just got 5 rules and 5 tools. What I'm tired of is seeing a lot of academic stuff and not being able to put it into practice. So this is deliberately very practical, straightforward stuff. And it doesn't matter whether I work on how to binge drinking, which I've done over the last 3 months, or whether I'm looking at childcare or safeguarding children, which I've done this year. This is the way that I do it, and I find it works really well. Now, you know about this first chart. I went through that first of all, about how change happens. It means we need a different type of evidence base, and this should now be straightforward. The first things that we need to know in our evidence base is, what do they know? Is it true? Do they relate it to what they're doing? And what are the facts that they accept? Are they aware that they suffer from the issue and it's important? The second are emotions. We've just got to get over ourselves and use new ways of finding out what are their attitudes, values, and beliefs and what really matters. I think we're pretty good on this one of how we can help, what can help us, because I think it's a natural part of policy making to weigh up, do we use stick and carrot and what's going for us. I think on the things to correct, there are often barriers. The issue that we have is not that we don't know them, we know too many. So we're likely to say, look, there are 32 barriers in this, and it's all very, very difficult. And actually, what we need to know are the 1 or the 2 or the 3 or the 4, the very small number that really makes the difference in what we do. There is a 5th box, I call it 5 box. I'm going to come back to this one on influencers because it's a whole new way of looking at influence. What we do with that evidence base is insight and evidence-based policy delivery and communication. Now, again, there will be a lot of people in the room who know what insight's about, but I'm just going to remind you what I mean by insight. Forgive me, I always start with this example. Is everyone familiar with links? Primary target market, for those who have already seen it. Who do you think when did we recruit boys into this brand? What age? 12 to 14-year-old boys. And this is the insight that brings them into it. My favourite fantasy is that I'm effortlessly attractive to hot women. If you think about it, it's a great example because it's worldwide. And it doesn't matter what ethnicity you are, what country you live in. If you're 12 to 14, that is likely to be your favourite fantasy, and they do it extremely well. I thought I'd also do Marmite today, since it was late in the afternoon. Love it or hate it. It's a rare example where we actually use the insight as part of our communication. Now, it goes deeper than appears on the surface. For those who love it, as soon as you talk about people who hate it, they feel absolutely obliged to defend this brand to you. The more they defend it, the deeper the relationship goes with them. That's why this is such a strong insight. One which I picked up earlier this year, I thought it was probably the only session in the whole of the 3 days of CS Live where we'd see pink knickers and a condom, so I thought I'd put it there. This is a big issue with a group of girls that we have who are very much at the forefront of teenage pregnancy. They know about condom use, they simply will not carry them, won't insist on use. And this is the insight, only slags carry condoms. They feel that if they carry them, it says something about who they are. So we know what insights are, and we know that once we've got these deep truths, we can really begin to look at the behaviour. Actually, I thought this is a real live example of why do we need insight and how does it help us make decisions. I worked on this brand, which is, again, I thought to keep people awake at the end of the day. It's actually an erectile dysfunction brand. I am a leading expert on it in terms of the marketing, if anyone would like to consult me afterwards. But I'm going to show you 2 pieces of communication. In this case, we want the couple to ask for this product, and we want the doctor to prescribe. Which one is going to get that to happen? The first is from the man's point of view. Why should men suffer? And it's a serious side effect of several illnesses, so that's why we want doctors prescribing. We're not in Viagra country here. Why should men suffering from high blood pressure be denied a sex life? Good question. And there was a very clever bit of communication where you could almost, cut down the lines, bring them together. Very sweet. The next one was this. Both of you suffer from depression. Only one of you has it. Which would you choose, first or second? Would you? Actually, I was going to say it probably is from your point of view. And I'll tell you what the insight is now. The insight is it's nobody's fault, we both suffer. And if we want to get doctors to prescribe, they are most affected by this particular insight and by the second concept that we have, because there they feel that it's a really legitimate thing that they should be prescribing for. And that's what gives us the clues. It helps us to decide what we do. Now, on the influencer map, I'm not going to go through this. You can do it at your leisure, but it's really helping us to decide who can help us do things. What we will face in behaviour changes, we cannot do it alone. We certainly can't do it with the smaller budgets that are coming our way. We have got to get people hooked in and helping us with it. And what this says is, we work out not stakeholders, but who can influence. And what we say to ourselves is, do they help us or do they compete with us? So if we take it from people's point of view, is it someone who I want to impress so I get respect from them? Do I want to join in and to be included in their tribe? Who are the people that I will learn from, I will trust to give me information? And who do I want to emulate so I feel supported by them? That is the way that we now look at it. And if you work through that diagram, you will see that that is the way that we now work out who is going to go with us and who's against us. It's a really, to me, an important change in the way that we look at stakeholders and those who help. And we then take them through the emotional journey. This is a very simple way of doing it. It's almost simplistic. But if you've got all of the things that I've said over the last 20 minutes fixed, this is the way that we put a social marketing package together where we can pull the right levers. We start off with what we do. If people don't see a need to change and they don't think there's something better at the end of the road, they won't change. So the first thing we have to do is create the need. Now, the second thing that we do is that people will naturally fear it. So what we do is create quick wins that get them into it. Actually, Change for Life has done this brilliantly with little steps, nothing too difficult. It doesn't say, look, you've got to change the whole of your life. It says, there's Sugar Swap, I think, is one of them. Just try, instead of giving children a biscuit, give them one of these. You know, after a week, they won't ask for biscuits again, so stick with it. Simple things that take the fear out of it and stop them packing up and going home from the start. We then make it seem doable, so we give them things that they really think that they can do to get them on the road to it. Later, we can build it up and we can build on it. We take out the big barriers. Now, if we've done our 5 boxes, okay, we should know what those big barriers are. And we work out how do we take those away from people. And then remember the Obama example I saw you. This is where all of those biases come into play. How do we get them to commit to do it? If they've committed, they are much more likely to do it, so we build that in. We then know that if we involve them, that they are more likely to believe that it's something for them and they will take it forward. And we reward them for doing that good, the good stuff that we want. And then how to sustain it. Now, this is a big win for us over the next year because I don't think we're going to have the budgets to spend the time and to persist for us to do it all by ourselves. That's where that big new thrust of partnership marketing comes. So we've got to get over ourselves. We have got to really harness the power that people like Tesco have. We have got to do it safely. We have got to do it with the right values, but we have got to do it in some way because they can really stretch what we're doing. The right partners can sustain it. That is probably the simplest way that I can describe to you what social marketing is all about. So if you think of the 32 biases we started with, that's where they come into play. That's how we put it together. Now, what do we then do about it? I'm not going to go through this. You will know all of this. You'll see it in the book when I talk about push the right buttons. You know what they are. We can legislate. You know, if you're a policy maker, you certainly will. We can legislate. We can put up, we can incentivize. We can give people different rewards. We can communicate with them in certain ways. There is nothing new about that, except we're building up more of the partnering and more of the influencer side of it. What I want to go through is what stops us doing it. And to me, that is silo working. That is the biggest issue I face. For 2 years, I feel like I've knocked my head against a brick wall trying to get this along. Because what you'll see, if you look at that simple diagram, is that it isn't about policy, it isn't about delivery, it isn't about communication. There is absolutely no demarcation. It says, if we work out how we take people on that emotional journey, we need to be working as a team to do it and pushing the buttons together. And while we silo work, we do not do it. We're working in isolation. And actually, this is what it feels like to me. If we take for those who are involved from the start and those who come in at the end, who's most important and who's least, it sort of feels like this to me. We have policy at the start who call the tune. They then do the searching and find the right things to do. They have a eureka moment, come up with a damn good idea, ministers buy into it, and then they write something nice and big and chunky about it that tells us why it's a good idea. As a communicator, this is where I feel I belong at the moment. It's somewhere right at the end, bottom right. And we still have this mentality, which is that it's a press release and a leaflet. You know, you're in comms, can you do me the leaflet? That's what I want us to overcome, because everything I've talked about for the last 30 minutes will not work unless we get over this ourselves and we work together as a team to push those right buttons. So that's what I would like us to be thinking about and working in this way. Personally, I'd restructure to do it. The chances of that happening probably are quite slim. But I think if we structured a different way, so we have to work together, not just on goodwill, but because that's how we have natural working teams, I think we'd do it. So, comms innovations and how to do it. If we get that behaviour change, I just want to end, and I've got about 5 minutes, with talking about a couple of really big things that matter to me. One is, the first one is what I call the matching luggage form of integrated communication and marketing. This is when, it's sort of the brand police who, as long as you've got the right logo on and the colour palette is right and everything is lined up and it conforms with the brand guidelines, which, by the way, is very important, that's what integrated communication means to them. It doesn't to me. To me, it's about how do we make all the right connections. And I do want to go back to something here. In the last, there's 4 times in history that the New York Times has used these gargantuan headlines for really big seismic shifts. Do you know what they are? Can you guess? The 4 times. Yes, any others? 9/11 was one. Actually, interesting enough, they didn't. The moon landing, they did. And the 4th one, which is interesting, is Nixon, the Nixon resignation and Watergate. The one which has been the most important and recent one is, I think, Obama. And forgive me if you've seen this, but I think it really is a reminder of what integrated communication is. It started off with a big idea. Now, I talk about proposition, but this, I think, is one of the great propositions, the yes, we can. They had the most fantastic use of social media, not gratuitously, because it seems like sort of a modern thing to do, but remember what they wanted to do. They had to get 15% more people out to the polls. This is what they did. They actually took the founder of Facebook and he put this together. iPhone application came a month before the elections, and it was all about calling friends, locating your nearest. But remember, if you can get people to commit, they're more likely to do it. My latest little thing that I'm absolutely passionate about, I don't know if you ever find those videos, homemade videos, which tell you how to do stuff. Now, I've had a big problem with my boiler this year, a really big problem. And I've had a plumber out to reset it roughly every 3 weeks. And I found this video on the internet, where someone has actually made a 5-minute video from Croydon showing you how to reprogram your boiler. It's absolutely fantastic. And I actually, at the same time, found this, which is a really good explanation of the iPhone. I won't play it all, but let's just look at the first few bits of it. Thank you.
Hi everyone, it's Ryan Ritchie with today's iPhone app review. And we're taking a look at an interesting one today. It's the Obama 08 app from the Barack Obama campaign. And this app, regardless of your political stance, is very interesting because it probably shows us what the future of campaigning might look like and the outreach to try to reach voters using mobile devices. So on the Obama 08 application, the top choice here is to call friends, and essentially this goes into your address book, shows all of your address contacts, and then allows you to keep track of whether you've talked to that person about voting and whether they plan on voting for your candidate or not. So that's interesting. That's the first part of the application. There are also ways to get involved, and some of the gripes we've heard from people this political season has been that it can be difficult once you go and sign up to help out with a campaign to get additional information. So you can do this right from the iPhone. You also have news. The news is split by both national and local headlines. It's a little bit overwhelming with the amount of information you can get, but you can also set it to use your location for the localized news, and that also allows you to find local events.
Thanks
so
very
if
much.
you want to see what's going on.
We'll just call a halt there. You get the idea, though. That is a real good application for what they do. And what's more, you can even personalize it with your own screensaver. They twittered. You ask questions online, he appears to answer you, and quickly. They used YouTube, and I think in a really good, he's very good for this. I mean, he lends himself to it very well. And this, I thought, had real impact. I don't know if you saw this. I've taken this off the internet, so I hope the quality's all right. But it was probably one of the most viewed on YouTube at that time during the election. If we just play a little bit of it, just to get started.
It was a creed written into the founding documents that declared the destiny of a nation. Yes, we can. It was whispered by slaves and abolitionists as they blazed the trail toward freedom. Yes, we can. Yes, we can.
It was sung
by immigrants as they struck out the distant shores of pioneers who pushed westward against the.
Thank you very much. That just gives you an idea of what it was all about. That, to me, is integrated communication. And I want to also just finish off with looking at Obama the brand, because I think that we use branding quite crudely across government. You think of the brand Obama and what was done there, a set of brand values, the look and the fit. I don't know if you noticed, everything I showed you was of a colour and of a look and a feel, and it was ruthlessly controlled and very, very effective. The proposition, what we're famous for, what's in it for people out there, yes, we can, was the summation of it. Everything that was put out there, the creative assets were very, very good, and there was absolute consistency about it. And I think that this captures it. This is the last thing that I'll look at. 20 years ago, I used to use something called, there was a brand tool, which was, you just asked people what was the first words that came into their head, and it was called the minute test for a brand. And it proved to be a really good predictor of what people associated with it, people's perception of brand equity. And in September, they asked people in the States what was the one word that best described the impressions of Obama. This is what it looked like. Remember, 2 months before polling. That was what it was. Normally, you would see many more words than that. By the way, the size of the words indicates how important it is. What you'll notice is the biggest one is a negative. There are some positive things there, but they're quite small. But overall, it's quite thin and colourless, if we're really honest about it, for a brand. This is what it looked like in February when he took office. And what you'll look at is through that truly integrated communication, he fleshed that brand out, and he really accentuated the positive. And that, I think, is what I'd like us to be doing. And a final thing, which I can't go without saying, is hear the real voice of the customer. This is great. If you ever get a chance to see it, just look at Nike. There's a great video on YouTube which shows people, I don't know if you know, when you design your own pair of Nike IDs, it appears on a huge video screen in Times Square. And there's a great reaction of people when they see what they've made. That, to me, is a sort of summation of what I want us to be doing. I think we're great at what we've done on this one, putting customers in charge and giving them relevant options. The phrase I use is make it as easy and pleasant as possible for people to do what they need to do with us. And then finally, I haven't talked about local. To me, the big challenge is think national, act local. How do we take things out there to where people live, not just those big national messages that cost us so dearly, but don't really impinge on people's lives? P&G use these pop-up stores. I've seen 5 or 6 examples now, and it strikes me as something really good. They're not that expensive to set up. They appear more or less overnight. They move around, and they're great for launches. I've also seen Bernardo's use them. I've seen Reebok for their launcher flash, and other products have used them really well. Really quick run through. I think I'm about 1 minute over, but I'm sorry there hasn't been time for I only got 45 minutes, so I wanted to get as much in. But if there's anything in there, in my rather handwritten, homemade book, anything you want to talk about, just email me and I'll come back with an answer. Thank you very much for sticking with it late in the afternoon.